Hi, everyone. Welcome to Healthflix. If you're watching on Sunday Live, happy Easter. If not, happy whatever it is for you. It's my pleasure to introduce Toni Jones. She is a journalist and founder of the Shelf Help Club, an online and offline personal development collective with over 12,000 members worldwide. And prior to launching her self-help brand, Toni was a features and fashion editor with over 15 years experience working on newspapers, websites, and magazines. Her work has appeared in various titles, including Women's Health, Grazia, Forbes, and The Telegraph. Welcome, Toni. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be involved, and congratulations to you and to you guys, because you've just achieved so much in 2 weeks. I've been watching the content as it's been rolling out, and I'm just kind of gobsmacked and amazed that it's been brilliant. So yeah, delighted to be here, to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been really amazing how much the community of self-help experts has been willing to come together and offer their support and their insight and guidance, as well as yourself. So from tabloid journalist to self-help advocate, self-love, right? Sorry, self-love advocate.
Both.
Share a bit about your journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think kind of self-love is at the heart of self-help anyway. For me, that's what I've learned through personal experience, and also through everything I learn from the books and the experts that I'm getting to meet. Yeah, so I think you've had so many amazing people on here, like doctors and healers and therapists, and I feel like I'm probably an expert by experience more. So as you mentioned, I spent 15 years working as a journalist. For 10 years I worked for The Sun, and then I worked for the Mail Online for a few years. So two big names in publishing, two quite infamous news titles, I suppose. And I think, yeah, I spent a long time just working under super high pressure, big deadlines, big teams of people. I worked hard, I partied hard, as did everyone around me. So kind of felt like it was normal and it was okay. And then it wasn't till probably I was about 35, 36 that I kind of just realized I just couldn't do it anymore. And I kind of, before I burnt out or got divorced or lost all my friends and lost my health, I just decided to leave my job as an editor at the Mail Online. And I didn't actually have anything where to go or anything to do. I just knew that it wasn't right. And I hadn't really spent any time before thinking about my values, even thinking about what my relationship was with myself. I just kind of like powered through life and kept myself super busy. And then suddenly I had this enforced slowdown, which is happening to lots of us, I think, right now. I left this high-powered job where I had a title and I thought I was a somebody, and then suddenly I was a nobody, and well, I felt like I was a nobody, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was sitting at home by myself all day, which was very different than being on a news floor, which I'd done for 15 years. Less money, less clout, less prestige. So it really shook me, and I felt like I lost my identity. So this is when I started kind of, like lots of us do, you kind of find that point where you start asking yourself the important questions. And then, yeah, eventually I kind of started reading. There's a book that I'm going to talk about, some books today that are my favorite books, especially with regards to the idea of self-love and self-compassion. And Paul McKenna is one of the authors of one of the books. And that was a book that literally jumped off the shelf and kind of fell on me one day. And that was the first one. And it's called How to Change Your Life in 7 Days. But it actually took me a year to read because so much in it was so new. All these concepts about you can choose your thoughts, you can teach yourself self-confidence, how we talk to ourselves matters. So I think all my training as a journalist, I'm now using as self-help. So self-help started as a book club because it was something I really needed. I wanted to share all this stuff that I was learning. My friends were getting bored of me talking about it to them and kind of pushing books on them. So I wanted to find some new friends who were as interested as I was in self-help. And it turns out there's loads of us. And because of like the magic of social media, Instagram, Facebook, I've managed to create this huge collective. And so we're all over the world now. When we're allowed to meet face to face, we have up to 30 meetups in 8 different countries, and people helping me spread the word of self-help, really. So yeah, it's kind of everything I learned I'm using now. So I really think probably 2 important things to take from my journey for anyone watching this who needs to think more about their relationship with themselves is that I'm using everything I learned now, even in the job that I didn't love, at the time, I didn't really know what I was doing or why I was doing it. But I really believe now that things happen to you, not for you, sorry, not to you. And definitely all the skills I picked up along the way, I'm able to use now. And also that I didn't start self-help until I was 40. That's 2 years ago. So I'd speak to a lot of people who come to the book clubs who are scared about leaving a job or trying something new because of their age or their situation. But I would just love to say that it's never too late to start falling in love with yourself and to kind of renew that relationship.
Mm. And I love the courage that you had and that you still have, because it does. It takes a lot of courage. Many of us are extraordinarily stressed, but we continue to live within that stress because the fear of the unknown and the uncertainty is greater than the, I guess, ability to step out and just trust. And I love what you said about the fact that the skills that you had built over those years were still portable to something else. And we forget that. We forget that if we're an expert in something, that we've developed the acumen to actually develop something else, even if we don't know what it is. So
Exactly.
thank you for sharing that. It's I think it's really moving. And yeah, I think that when we get older, and not that 40 by any means is old,
No.
but when we get older, we imagine, I've invested so much already in this career and I can't start over. You know I think that sometimes, even though I love what I do, but I have these moments of imagining going to Thailand, and I'm heading to my mid 40s now. And then I think, oh, but I built up the Minded Institute. I couldn't start again. So I really value that as a lesson. And yeah, it's wonderful. So how would you define self-love, and why do you think it's important for our health and well-being?
I think self-love for me and self-compassion, self-acceptance it's the most fundamental thing to having a good life or a better life or any kind of good, interesting life. I think I really started self-help because I wanted to help people learn to like themselves more, because I really was learning by all these people I was meeting that so many of us don't. And I don't know if we even really know it. I don't know if we know that we don't respect ourselves or have the boundaries that might help us kind of do better things or be kinder to ourselves. So for me, I think self-love is first of all about being kind to yourself and self-compassion and giving yourself a break and remembering that we did and we do what we can with what we have. So things that you've done in the past or things that you do now that you're not proud of doesn't make you a bad person. Bad behavior is not the same as being a bad person. So I think there's a lot of kind of I'm going to talk about Brené Brown in a minute, who's an author that I love, and she does a lot of talk about work around shame and vulnerability and how to be able to love ourselves, we need to be able to kind of own our stories, basically. So firstly, to be kind, to be compassionate, and then also to kind of to sometimes make the hard decisions for ourselves, like you would if you were parenting a child. Sometimes they're not going to like you when you make these decisions, that whether it's not going out with their friends or not spending money they don't have or eating the stuff that you know they should be eating. So treating yourself like you would someone that you just really love and care about. And sometimes that is making the harder decisions. And I feel like it's always important. This is the cornerstone of all self-help for me. I think the relationship we have with ourselves is the most important one we'll ever have. And if we can make that good, and if we can make that the best it can be, then everything else elevates in our lives. And then we're able to then make changes in other people's lives, either whether that's by leading by example or by being just a strong, secure, happy, healthy person who can then take care of other people and kind of share this message. So now, yes, more important than ever, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I so agree with what you've said. I think that our external universe is almost created and crafted by what's going on inside. And if we take care of that, the external conditions seem to fall in place, whether that's, divine intervention, or whether that's we're just interrelating in a different way so things are easier. I do agree that it makes such a massive difference.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you decide which books that you're going to read? How do you embark on a journey for a new book that you may share with other people?
I started just sharing books that had really changed my life. And I still do share books that have done that now. So I choose a different book every 2 months now. Originally, it was one book a month. But people were falling behind because obviously self-help is a lot of the books, they require quite a lot of reflection and kind of inner work. And kind of giving people homework every month and then feeling like it was a chore to catch up on your self-help is not the point of self-help. So now we do one book every 2 months, and I choose books that have made a big impact on me, but also that I feel that we can kind of dissect together as a group, because for me, it's all about making self-help collaborative, because obviously the clue is in the title. We need to do the work ourselves, but doing it as part of a network or a community or a team makes it just so much more powerful, I think. So I really want to make self-help accessible and collaborative. So to make self-help a team sport is my kind of strap line. But yeah, so the first book that I just talked about, the Paul McKenna book, I shared that with the community. And it's really interesting because everyone has different opinions, don't they? And the good thing about a book club is I'm not necessarily teaching these methods. I'm just kind of connecting people to the ideas and experts. And what happens now is every time somebody joins us through Facebook or Instagram, we ask, what's your favorite book? And then I've started using that information to kind of define the next book choices. So we did Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway recently, and Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, just because they're two books, they're two total classics, and that people are still learning from, and the lessons are still so needed. So it's a kind of a combination of things that have really shaped my life, and also books that people within the community tell me have made a big difference to them.
Lovely. It's really nice that you have this community building around you, and it starts to organically inform what kind of happens next.
Yeah, totally.
Let's dive into some of those books.
Yeah.
Why don't you share some of your favorites and some lessons from each one? So
I'd love to.
Listening can from the source.
Yeah, sure. So this is the first one that I'd love to share. It's by Brené Brown. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection. So I mentioned her earlier, but I think Brené Brown is just a brilliant place to start as a woman to look at her work. For anybody who's interested in getting more into self-help, she's done an incredible TED Talk, which I think is one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. And again, it's about shame and vulnerability, which don't sound like too massively interesting or maybe positive subjects to talk about, but she very much is about how learning to own your story and share your story is so important. I call myself a recovering undersharer, because I've always been very good at not really talking about what's going on. And I thought being a good friend and being a good partner was about not sharing the crap stuff. And what I learned from this book is that connection is all about that. If you're not opening up to somebody, then you're not letting them in. So they're not going to see that side of you that you want to see in them. I think she's got a brilliant quote, and she says, vulnerability is the first thing I want to see in you and the last thing I want you to see in me. So it's kind of, I almost want to know a little bit about you so I can help and support you, but I don't ever want you to know that about me. And I think that's how a lot of us kind of go through life. So that was a big lesson from that book. And also on our bookmarks and on the website, I have a Brené Brown quote, which is, we don't have to do it all of it alone. We were never meant to. And I really love her idea of sharing the learnings, bringing people together, connecting about all these themes, because they affect all of us, don't they? They're so universal. I think that's why a book club like this is successful, because everyone everywhere in the world is struggling with their relationship with themselves sometimes on some kind of level. So yeah, that was a big lesson from that book. Also, the fact that you can't numb the dark without numbing the light is the quote. And that really resonated with me, because I used to just try not to feel much at all. And I thought that was a good way, again, to roll through life. So just to kind of be super busy, have a packed schedule, be traveling, be either working or partying or hungover, working, partying, hungover, and not have any time to actually hang out with myself. And then I realized, from having time with myself, from reading books like this, that numbing the painful feelings that I was obviously inevitably putting off meant that I was numbing everything. So without the sadness, you don't appreciate or understand the happiness. And that's something that I've really learned over the last few years. And that sadness comes and goes in waves the same way that happiness does. And so trying to maintain this kind of constant level of I'm busy and I'm great and everything's fine, it's not sustainable, and it's not a good way to be, and it's not the way to be happy. So there are two lessons. Sorry, a long answer about this book.
I loved what you said. And again, it's really about courage. I love that idea that that quote will really stay with me. It's the first thing I want to see in you and the last thing I want you to see in me. Yeah. But actually, I think that you're right. We can't have meaningful relationships if we're not willing to be vulnerable. I also think, and I know you didn't touch on this theme yet, but shame is such a pervasive human emotion, and we're ashamed of shame. And it closes us off and makes it very difficult for us to live fulfilling lives. So I think as a culture, we actually need to be addressing the entire concept of shame, and the willingness to say, I'm uncomfortable being me, and acknowledge maybe in a community that that's such a common experience, and we don't realize it if we're all putting on masks all the time.
Exactly. So it's like we're all kind of faking it, right? So it needs that one person or that one book or to start the conversation around it. So yeah, I think you're totally right.
And I think people really want to, if they have that feeling of safety, I think they really want to talk about it, because like you said, you can't really dull it. You can try, but sooner or later it will percolate to the surface. And so it's nice when you can kind of just like let a little bit of air out of that growing pressure cooker.
Yeah,
share that with others. So that's great. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, great.
I've never even heard of the TED Talk, but I'm gonna look.
Oh, it's amazing. It's incredible. And also she's brilliant because she's a researcher and she's very academic and she's Texan and she's like kind of no BS, very straightforward. And then she has what she calls it's a spiritual breakthrough / mental breakdown in her 40s. And she started going to therapy, and she said to the therapist, I don't want to talk about any parent stuff. I just want to kind of give you some homework. I want to be done in 2 weeks. And the pet therapist is like, that's not really how it works. And that also happened to me. At the same time I started reading a lot of the books, I did start going to talk therapy. And I used to always say, so what's my homework? What shall I do for next week? And my therapist would say, just go home and just feel. Just think about what we just talked about and just feel it. And to me, it was just such an alien concept. So I think when you find an author who you can relate to in that way, like she's got her own struggles and she says, but the research doesn't lie. I don't necessarily like talking about this stuff. This is what Brené Brown would say. But I can tell you it's so helpful and healing. So I do it. So I think that's really good with someone who's honest and you can relate to, because you can kind of relate to their struggles. I think that's really important in self-help.
Lovely. So what else? What other books do you have for us?
I wanted to talk about this one, I Heart Me. I just love the cover for a start. But I suppose this is looking at this cover, this would be the kind of book that I would not be caught like seeing caught dead reading about 5 years ago, because I would be so embarrassed. And now I can literally want to wear it on a t-shirt all day, because I do heart me, and it's taken a while to get there. But David Hamilton is a scientist. So this is a great book for any kind of non-believers, because it's the science behind self-help. So the science behind the mind-body connection. He actually contributed to Heal, the documentary, which is a great documentary about how our feelings, how we feel manifests itself in the body, in illness, in disease, in stress. And it's what he talks about here is the scientific backing, but in really kind of relatable terms. And he says that there are 3 stages of the self-help kind of curve that he's identified. And it's I'm not enough, which is where most of us spend our time and don't even really realize it. And then it's I've had enough, which is that kind of, it's actually the magic point, but it's when you feel at your bottom, but that's when the shifts are happening. And it's like, I can't go on like this anymore. So whether that's me in a job that was kind of killing me, like physically, emotionally, mentally, or whether it's someone who's been made redundant or has had a loss or gets ill or burns out, that's the point of I've had enough. So something has to change. And then from that comes I am enough. And that is when you are in a state of, as much as you can be, contentment and gratitude. And I think contentment is a really important word, because it's the C word I used to hate. I was like, who wants to be content? I wanted, like I said earlier, like high octane busyness, happiness, cool, busy, loads going on. But actually contentment now for me is just the dream. Just that's how I want to be. I want to feel content. And there'll be amazing highs and there'll be lows, and learning to ride that is a big lesson. So yeah, I love David Hamilton for this. He also talks a lot about kind of how we change our body can change how we're feeling mentally and emotionally. So just sitting up straight or doing the power pose. I don't know if you've heard of Amy Cuddy's power pose, where you stand like this before you have a big presentation. I was doing it before I talked to you today in the loo. But how, and even kind of giving yourself the hug when we can't get hugs at the moment from our friends or family, just rubbing your chest here for 10 seconds releases oxytocin, which is going to kind of bring all your stress levels down, change your brain chemistry, make you feel better just by making those kind of physical changes. So for me, that was really important about that book.
I think it's really, really useful as well to have these little tips about how to change our physiological state right now, because like you said, if we don't have somebody else to help us co-regulate, we need to find ways to do it. And it's all fine and dandy to say, okay, just sit down and enjoy your own company. But
yeah,
it's very challenging for us. I like this tip. If I could share one with you, and for everybody else watching. So you have here one of the three roots of your trigeminal nerve, and it feeds to your nucleus tractus solitarius, which is a main entry point in your brain for sensory input. And it has the potential to evoke parasympathetic or rest or digest response. And when we apply pressure to it, as we can do with drawing infinity symbols with our finger on our forehead, 8 in one direction and 8 in the other direction, it's like an 8 on its side, it actually will calm us down almost immediately. The other thing is we could just roll our forehead on a desk, which is even more powerful because of the pressure. So it's another way of just calming ourselves down really easily. We need these.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just felt like sharing because I love the one you offered.
I'm going to use it. It's brilliant. And you're right, it is. It's so soothing, isn't it? And again, it's self-care, isn't it? It's doing things for yourself. So I think self-care, self-love, it's about learning what makes you feel healthy and happy and then doing more of it. So things that, just the small tips like this is so brilliant.
I agree. And I think you have more books for us still.
Yeah, I have. I don't know how long I can talk about them forever, as you can tell. I'll keep going until you tell me to stop.
A lot of time, right? We've got
okay.
Well, I don't know that.
Okay, cool. Well, let's keep going until we get told to stop. Let's talk about Paul McKenna. I call him the one. My husband doesn't love that, but he's the one that changed it all for me. And I think the thing about self-help and all this kind of work is it's whatever comes at the right time. Like this book found its way to me. I found my way to it, whatever, at the right time. And it's from like the early 2000s. I started reading it a couple of years ago, but it's so full of what were to me at the time totally brand new concepts that it was just like light bulbs going off every page. And I've then, from reading this book, then went on to read and learn about lots of other concepts like inner child work, mirror work, lots of NLP, CBT kind of methodologies that he uses, because I think lots of us know Paul McKenna as the kind of the hypnotist off TV in the UK. But he's done so much training in NLP and positive psychology, and he's got so much good stuff to say. So yeah, I love this book. And a few of the lessons I wrote down about, talk about the inner child work, which I know so some people might be a level too deep when you're just first starting in self-help, but he manages to kind of explain that in relatable and workable ways. I'll just share quickly, when I'd never heard of inner child work, but when I first started trying to picture what inner me looked like, it was a black and white young girl in rags, locked in a castle, locked in a tower with no daylight, no food, no furniture. And then that kind of makes you think, okay, maybe I haven't really been giving myself too much TLC. Now very different, but it's things like that I would never have spent the time to do until you pick up a book like this, right? So and I feel like now all of us have more time to be reading. Now we're not traveling around so much. Lots of people I know are being more reflective. I know that because our book club's busier than ever, and people want to talk about these kind of concepts more than ever. So yeah, this is a brilliant book, as in it gives a real kind of overview. It says read it, and it says change your life in 7 days, and there's a different kind of concept daily, but I would give it a bit longer than that, probably, like maybe not a year like I did, but quite a while. But yeah, that was the one.
Fantastic. And I think, you can return to those old faithful ones over and over again and keep reading the same section and get new juicy bits from it. And depending
Yeah.
on where you are in your life, it means something different to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and totally. And I would also recommend or urge people to go back to books that they didn't appreciate or enjoy. Like I still haven't finished The Power of Now. I've started it a few times, and I know, and I understand the concepts of it, and I feel like I live the concepts, but the writing for me just doesn't flow. I don't find it easy to read, so I'm going to do it one day, but it's just not right for me at the moment. And then, like you said, there's books that I go back to. I'm going to talk about this one in a minute. You Can Heal Your Life, Louise Hay, from the 80s, this book. And this was one of the first that I read after Paul McKenna. And then we read it again recently as part of the book club read, and so many new insights. And also I found some of the old scribbles that I'd done, because I am a scribbler in the books. And it doesn't even sound like me anymore, because it was, at the time, it was something that I was maybe learning about or working on, or that really struck me, that I found very important enough to make a scribble in the book. But now I'm glad to say that I've moved on from that, and then there's new insights. So yeah, totally, there's definitely, these kind of books are the ones that you can just go back to again and again, I think.
By the way, I love The Power of Now. I hope you get through it. Thinking about it the whole time you were talking. With this second book where you were talking about I've had enough, because he has that breakdown and then that breakthrough. But I know, everything is different for different people, but I hope someday you get through it.
Yeah, me too. I think I might Audible that one. I do love to Audible books. When I'm doing the book club, I usually listen to something on Audible first, and then if I think it's going to work for to do as a group, then I'll read it a few times. But yeah, I think I'm going to do Audible for that one. So should I talk about this one quickly?
Please.
So I'm sure you've heard of Louise Hay. I'm sure lots of people watching have heard of Louise Hay. She was, I think you probably call her the godmother of self-help. A lot of people call her. She was one of the founders of the self-help movement from the 70s into the 80s. And for her, everything came down to self-love, self-compassion, being kinder to ourselves. I think she says at the very beginning of this book, for anyone who has a problem or feels unhappy somewhere or stuck in their life, it all comes down to not feeling enough and not feeling good enough. And that is a result of low self-worth, low self-esteem, which is obviously the opposite of self-love and self-compassion. So the book kind of works through as though you were at a session with Louise herself, because she was a therapist and a counsellor, but then also contains something she called the list. So again, about the mind-body connection. Louise Hay was a big believer in any kind of emotional trauma or things that we haven't worked through manifesting themselves in the body as illness or disease. So lots of different illnesses, she says, can be traced to different aspects of our past and our background, and to move through that, quite often it's about forgiveness of what happened in the past and letting that go, and also just being kind to ourselves in the now. This book really introduced me to the idea of affirmations and just surrounding myself with positive talk, giving myself positive self-talk, which again is something that I hadn't really noticed that I didn't do until I actually was sitting by myself all day, every day at home, writing by myself. And then you get to know the voice in your head. And mine wasn't that nice to me. So this book was a brilliant way to, first of all, just become aware of that, and then make the switch. So yeah, really powerful stuff, I think, but also quite gentle. I call it like a hug in book form, because I feel like it's gentle but really powerful.
It kind of looks like that with the cover as well.
Yeah.
I think it is quite amazing for many of us to recognize how self-critical we are, and we're not aware of it if we don't sit down and listen to our thoughts. I remember the very first time I meditated, it was just like bubbles of self-loathing over and over and over, and I thought, oh, no wonder I'm happy. So anything that could help us to identify that and then start to shift the trajectory,
yeah,
so important.
And definitely, and the idea of affirmations, I know lots of people kind of don't like the idea of saying I am beautiful or I am rich or I am smart when they feel anything but that. But we say the opposite to ourselves all the time. And for lots of us, when we kind of embark on any kind of self-help work, we're trying to unprogram a lifetime's worth of learning and a lifetime's worth of experiences, kind of confirming a lot of negative things for lots of us. And that's even if you haven't had a completely crazy or traumatic childhood. You know, everyone has experiences that shape them. And so I think the books like this, and especially that one, yeah, it's just good to, like you say, recognize. And then the book I'm going to talk about now, the author of that, it's called Shahru Azadi, and she says to me, when you hear that voice, it's not a command, it's just an alert. So just that voice in your head is telling you that you're stupid, or that you don't deserve the job, or that you're going to mess up the presentation. It's kind of like, oh, thanks for that information, not helpful. I'm going to switch it for a new thought. And I think that's just something so powerful in that, isn't there? And even if it doesn't, even if you don't think it works, it can't do any damage. What possible damage could it do?
And actually, that technique has been something that's been used since time immemorial, so we shouldn't underestimate it. We find it in almost every spiritual tradition, the recognition of thoughts that are not useful and the replacement of thoughts that are.
Yeah.
And before you speak about your last book, you know, I think what you're doing is so important, because up until recently, wherever we go, we're bombarded with information that is meant to make us feel not good enough. Because if we felt good enough, we wouldn't keep buying things. We wouldn't keep buying new clothes, new hairstyles, this, that, the other thing. And so it is absolutely pertinent that we're nourishing our mind with positive kinds of things, because society is operated on us feeling a sense of lack. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's really highlighted at the moment, because we've stopped consuming so much. Like it's probably kind of gone to, like, it's the least consuming I've done for a long time. And I'm really careful about how I consume news, how I shop, you know, kind of what I'm putting in my head as well as my body now. But yeah, now I think people are really realizing, like, Instagram even looks a bit like a different place now, because the people who were just trying to sell us stuff and look hot doing it, it's like, that's not valuable or interesting to most of us now, because we don't need to, like you say, with that feeling of lack. Actually, we're kind of, most of us are now being grateful for the really small things. So the stuff that we used to take for granted is now sometimes the stuff of daydreams, like having Easter weekend with your friends or your family, or being able to just pop out and buy an Easter egg, or just these kind of things now are a big deal for us. So suddenly an advert for a really expensive handbag just seems, to me, ridiculous. So I think this is now a really interesting time, and for loads of us it can be an opportunity to think about the stuff that is probably there. And like for me, I didn't know what I was going to do when I left my job. I just knew I had to do it, and there was something that was always there, and I just drowned it out for as long as I could, until it didn't let me anymore, I suppose. So I think for now is a good time for us to, now that we're consuming less, to be more careful about what we're thinking about, and kind of and how we're thinking about the future and stuff like that.
Because we can change now, can't we? And I mean, that's one of the reasons we asked you to come on, because you are talking to people about how they can use books to change their life, and what better time than now?
Exactly. Now is the best. It's about positive change, and positive things are coming out of this time. But lots of people, I understand it's a really intense, difficult, worrisome time, but we're going to look back in a year and we'll be different people. How do we want to look back on this time? What are we going to regret not having done in this time? Are people going to regret not hanging out with their kids more, or playing with their kids? Or are people going to regret not reading the books that they've been saying they're going to read? So I think, it's a good time to ask some important questions, and books like this are just a good way to even just start that process. Even if sometimes I'll only take one thing from a book, but if that thing is something that's going to change how I think about myself, or how I treat myself, or how I make plans for my whole life, then I think that's pretty mega.
I would agree.
So
one before some Q&A time, right?
Sure. Yes. So I'm going to show you this on the iPad, because my copy is on loan. Because it's the book I lend to everybody, and it's called The Kindness Method, and it's by Shahru Azadi. So this is now a book it's the first book I will give to anybody who is interested in changing the relationship with themselves. This is actually really a book about habits initially. So Sharu is a behavioral change specialist, and she's worked in addiction, and she's also dealt with her own food issues, kind of losing, I think, between 8 and 9 stone on and off and on and off over the last 10 years. And she, after she worked in addiction in the NHS, she started using the methods that she'd used on the front line at the NHS with people who just wanted to make small changes in their lives, and realized that the methods that she'd been teaching, which were self-compassion, being proud of yourself, self awareness, these were the exercises that she shared with people who were dealing with really hard addictions, can work for any habit. So the kindness method is full of lots of different maps that kind of invite you to look at times in your life that you've done something that made you proud, or that you did something that made you feel happy or important. Or so you start off by just kind of going back through your life, and I suppose highlighting the fact that we've all done good stuff and we should all be proud of ourselves in some ways. So I think for people who really struggle with self-esteem, it's a brilliant book because it takes it right back to basics. And these aren't maps that you're going to share with anybody, but that it's just a way to kind of start compiling some information about yourself that is positive. Because Sharu also says that we put off lots of habit changes. We put it off until we kind of do the thing we want to do. So if we put off being kind to ourselves until we've lost the weight, or until we've got the new job, or until we've stopped drinking or left the boyfriend or whatever. And she says, if you start making the changes now, then life kind of falls into place a lot quicker. So start treating yourself now like you want to be, like you are the person you want to be, and it will happen more quickly. So Sharu says that she's one of her therapists said to her one day, what if you never lose weight? And it's what she'd spent 10 years trying to do. And she said it really that was the kind of the catalyst for a lot of this work she does, which was, I need to start being kind to myself now, like using the nice body creams, making myself a nice dinner, spending time doing things I like. So I think the kindness method is good at, like I said earlier, working out what makes you feel happy, what makes you feel healthy, and then planning to do more of it and putting it into your life. So by the time you finish that book, you'll have a plan of what you should be doing and where you can do it. And she's also quite good at highlighting the fact that we do all get triggered by different things, and we're not all going to wake up tomorrow and be a brand new person, even if however much we want to. Like, willpower is limited. So it's about kind of knowing that we can do hard things. So the earlier work in the book is a reminder to yourself that you've done the hard stuff before. You can do it. We can do it. That things come and, life shifts and shapes, and things will change. But identifying places that you feel like you might be triggered, and then how you're going to deal with those kind of tough times. So whether that is when you feel stressed, you normally eat, or you normally go and hit the pub, or you normally have an argument with your boyfriend, it's like, what can you do instead? So back to your point about what are the small things that we can do to make those that can make the changes, and actually those small things add up to such huge changes ultimately. So yeah, I love that book for anyone who's really just kind of hates the thought of self-love, because to them it seems like such a kind of alien concept. So I think it's a good place to start.
I've loved what you've said about it, and that really important reminder that in the here and now we have to do that thing rather than putting it off. And then our life does start to transform, and often we achieve that thing, or that thing comes to us that we're waiting on.
Yeah.
And we have to have that sense of discipline. And discipline, I think you said this in the very beginning, in other words, is part of kindness, and we shouldn't forget that. Kindness isn't always just, I don't feel like doing this, I'm giving myself a break. Sometimes it's bucking up and saying, okay, I'm going to actually engage in this aspect of my life more, and be a really fervent participant in this aspect of change. So thank you for all these lovely messages. Is there anything that you want to leave everybody with before potentially people ask questions?
I would just say, like, as I said at the beginning, it's never too late to start a new relationship with yourself. Like, it's the most important relationship we all have. We're going to be with ourselves forever. We're the one person who's hanging around. So I feel like it's always valuable to do any kind of self-help work, whether that's read a book, go to a course, listen to some affirmations, kind of join a club, join a community. So yeah, just try lots of different things. That's what I did. Like the books will lead to other things, like you said, Heather, as well. Like things, as you make a few changes, things will come to you, and then they lead on to sometimes amazing things. Like I'm now running my business is telling people about self-help, which is my dream job, and that's happened because I've done all the self-help. So I think yeah, I feel like I'm kind of hopefully leading by example. It's not easy always, and it's not an overnight fix, but it's like I said earlier, we can be unprogramming a whole lifetime's worth of conditioning, right? So it's give yourself, be patient, be kind, and yeah, just get started.
Wonderful. Well, we have a question here, which is, how can I join Shelf Help?
Oh, what a great question. I feel like that might be my mum who just logged on. No. Well, there's a few different ways actually. So we're online on Instagram and Facebook, and then we share lots of free content there. And our community on Facebook is great. There's lots of chat going on, lots of supportive posts and threads there. There's I run a Toni's book club, which is where we talk about the new book of the month, and every Monday at the moment, because we've gone online. So for the virtual meetups, I'm hosting a meetup every Monday night at 7:00 GMT, and that's just for people to check in. So it's like a kind of super accountability group, really. So we're on chapter 3 at the moment of our book of the month, which I'll show you in a minute. And yeah, I'll find it. Here we go. So that's this is called Everything is Figure-Outable. So Marie Forleo, she's from New Jersey. I don't think figure-outable is a real word, but I love it. And I chose it for now because everything is figure-outable, right? Like we can't stop a global pandemic, but we can control how we react to things, and we can control our part to play in this. And she's relentlessly optimistic, and she is it's just a different, this book is something we've been talking about today a lot. It's about the reframe. It's about kind of, instead of just saying, oh, nothing will work, it's all gone downhill, it's kind of like, how could this work for me? What is the opportunity in a situation? What is the lesson to learn? So yeah, if you want to join Toni's book club, then we talk about this every Monday night, and we're only on chapter 3, and it's a really kind of easy read. So you can come to the website, I think, which is shelfhelp.club, probably the easiest way. But thanks for that question.
If there are any other questions, feel free to ask now. We're actually getting to the end of time. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry that I talk a lot about the books, but I feel like there's a lot to say about them, right?
No, I think it was brilliant. I'm really inspired to go out and read some.
What's your favorite self-help book? Is it The Power of Now?
It's not. That is a favorite, but mine might be a bit extreme. I lived in Buddhist monasteries for 3 years. I really understand that giving up that you were talking about. I actually lived in Manhattan after graduating from university, and had the opportunity to go to law school and take over my father's practice, and was in the depths of despair and depression, left everything behind, gave up everything that I could have had in my life, and went to Southeast Asia and lived in Buddhist monasteries for 3 years, because I was really at the end of my rope. So my favorite book is one by a Buddhist nun called When Things Fall Apart, Hard Advice for Difficult Times. And for me, it's gotten me through the edge of actually wanting to take my own life, to be really blunt about it. I have been suicidal, and any time in my life where I feel like I cannot meet that next moment, I pick it up again. So it might be a bit extreme because it is coming from a woman, who shaved her head and gave everything up and lived in a monastery for the rest of her life. But I also think that there's really valuable gems in that book.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was, for you, it was a lifesaver, and so it will always have that power. And that's why I think self-help is so magic, because sometimes you need the reassurance, and especially at the moment, I think that it's reassurance, it's inspiration, it's affirmation. Sometimes it's permission to do something different, or to think a different way. So yeah, if you just take one thing from one book, then how amazing is that?
Yeah, and thank you to all those authors who write these words that can change our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Toni, so much for your time on this Easter Sunday. We
Thank you.
really appreciate it. Your talk will go live. Well, it is live right now on YouTube. It'll go up as a recorded talk on YouTube for people to watch into the future. And I look forward to connecting with you more. You're doing great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, you too. I'm really pleased to be part of it all. I'm very proud of you for everything you've done over the last 2 weeks. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.